I'm upload right now. It's only 3 minutes. Apparently, that's like vomiting up a watermelon hole for my internet. So there may be some throttling going on in the earlier parts of this, and hopefully it won't lag too terribly, and it'll clear up by the time we get around to the meat and potatoes and the bread and butter. But this is a very, very delayed response, which is crazy because the day that I saw the content in question, I spent over an hour at least writing up a whole response emphatically. But things happened. I got preoccupied and never got around to doing it, but it's been sitting in my to-do list, and I do think it's really important. I consider it valuable and worth discussing. So I'm gonna go back and revisit it now. Hopefully the person who I'm responding to is still alive and things are in working order. I don't know, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, but I will link, once this is finished processing, either in the description or the comment section, the original video, which is another 3-minute short like the one I'm uploading now, but a little bit more, in the one I'm uploading now, I was coming after the theists. In this one, 2 months ago, how's that? When you're in a procrastination competition and your opponent is me. Cooked, buddy. I was going after the atheists. Now, explaining my position would be a little bit outside the bounds of this discussion, but and because it's complex and it would take quite a while to lay out. It's nuanced, and I've already yapped long enough, so I'd like to get into this now. But more or less, the video was titled "Atheists' Moral Burden," and basically I was saying, if you don't believe that there's a God, because there's no evidence, that's fine. But it now falls on you to realize and actualize that potential within the cognitive domain into reality, and you now have the responsibility of God. Not that you are God, because you're definitely clearly not, any of us. But essentially, there's a big problem of morality in the world. So much so that ignoring it would place all things on an even playing field and smooth the waters completely for atrocious acts like bearorism and bull bootings. Yeah, that's an outlandish, outrageous statement. I recognize that, but well, that's for another time, really. Anyway, this person, another viewer, very rational, very intelligent, well organized in their speech, and formulaic and sensible in their response. I'm just going to read off to you what they said, so you'll have the provided video to go back and see what I was talking about. But what he said was, here's how I see it. The whole idea that if you're an atheist, you have some moral obligation to create God in an afterlife just doesn't make sense. I'm an atheist, and that simply means I don't believe in any gods because there's no good evidence for them. It doesn't mean I'm supposed to build one or invent an afterlife like some kind of engineering project, which is basically exactly what I'm talking about, and have been for some time now, after many existential crises. Morality doesn't depend on God for me. I base what's right and wrong on reason, empathy, and how we affect each other. Plenty of atheists live ethical lives without believing in any supernatural forces or promises of an afterlife. Saying that without God everything is immoral is just plain wrong. I don't think I said that. I would disagree on a different premise that I didn't write down, so I'm going to mention it right now. Reality itself is immoral as it's currently instantiated, unless there's something we're missing. And reality as we know it is more compatible with the theological argument of Gnosticism and the demiurge, the false, blind, evil creator god of the material realm, who takes horrific delight and sadistic pleasure in the torment of his trapped immaterial souls that are forced into this world of suffering. It's much more congruent. If you use Occam's razor, that the most likely argument, or what appears most obvious to be true, is true, then you would go with the demiurge, or Warren Roko's basilisk hellfire torture simulation after we didn't create him, but he existed anyway. Anyway, I also don't see why rejecting the idea that I must create a god or an afterlife would make me nihilistic or selfish. I'm fully aware that life ends, and I don't need supernatural comfort to care about doing good or helping others. Morality isn't about avoiding death or trying to cheat it, it's about how we live here and now. The analogy comparing God to presidents is off. I did that. We elect presidents to deal with real problems, but the idea that there's some all-powerful super being we should quote-unquote elect or engineer is just wishful thinking. Expecting atheists to create a god is imposing a religious framework on people who don't accept that framework in the first place. So yeah, I care about making the world better, advancing science, and exploring the future, but that doesn't mean I have some responsibility to build a god or invent an afterlife. Morality and purpose come from our choices and values as humans, not from forcing myself to believe in something I don't find evidence for. Now, I thought that was very well formulated, but a couple little notes to touch on here before I move on to my thorough essay responding to this. Let me just find exactly which part I wanted to address. Well, and I'm not sure if I'll mention this later, which is why I do it now. You don't see why rejecting the idea that you must create a god or an afterlife would make me nihilistic or selfish. First of all, this isn't a criticism, it's just clarifying. I don't think that the burden falls on a singular person. You know, it's not like, well, you don't believe in God, so now, atheist, you have to create him. No, it would be the only sensible collective endpoint goal for humanity to strive towards. And if you reject that idea, I challenge anybody to find a higher, more objective meaning that counters Nietzsche's nihilistic philosophy than that. It doesn't mean you think life has no meaning, but you do necessarily admit that all of your meaning that you find in reality will be subsumed by the metaphorical, crushing, devouring, sadistic serpent at the end of time. Because that's where we're going, heat death, right? And just regular old kind. Does it make you selfish? To the extent that it makes a draft dodger selfish to not go fight in World War II. If no, then no. To the extent it is for someone to pull a child out of the way of a rapidly oncoming vehicle when they risk getting hurt themselves, they may very well pull it off and get the person out of the way. But they're sacrificing, in this case, your time and effort, not knowing when you'll die, to hopefully save everybody, which is even more noble than saving a child from a car. And you might get hit. Whether that makes you selfish or not, I suppose, is a matter of personal opinion. I probably addressed this later, but he said I'm fully aware life ends and I don't need supernatural comfort to care about doing good or helping others. For one, in the prevailing Christian philosophy, you don't, or doctrine, you don't get into heaven by good deeds, so you don't need to worry about that anyway. If you're a Buddhist, it's a little different scenario. I think everyone's fully aware that life ends. But everything you're helping is going to inevitably die. You're not even budging the surface of the beginning of a dent of making an impact on that. It's meaningless, truly. That would be the definition of nihilism. Not everyone else feels that way too. If you were to say, I don't need supernatural comfort to care about the pleasures of this life and that I will die and there will be no afterlife, or, closure and catharsis and redemption for me, for all the things I went through, I suppose that's fine, but it is fundamentally selfish to impose that necessarily on other people when there is a workable alternative. I mean, just look at how much the transhumanists peddle superintelligence. Why? Why would we want and strive for and desire utopia if we were already living in it? There's something fundamentally flawed and lacking in this world. Just objectively speaking, existentially, eternally. And if we don't create God, then it will always stay that way. And what we will be is feeling, sentient, conscious, perceiving beings who are tormented and suffered needlessly before crushing, cruel obliviation into the eternal endless void. Stripped and violated, if you get what I mean, before our eternal perishment. Punished needlessly. We didn't do anything, especially if you don't believe in original sin, which is insane to begin with. Morality is literally about avoiding death, in many cases. The only thing more immoral than killing someone is tormenting them in a basement for 6 months. Trying to cheat it would be a fundamentally moral thing to do if you were able. As long as you're not keeping someone alive in a tormentual hell prison of suffering, but you're actually making life better, which is well within your means if you can conquer death empirically. That's good. And it's about how we live here and now. Well, here's how life goes. The world takes more than it gives. Then it takes what it does give, and offers only that which one can never truly taste. No. Terms and conditions denied. Sorry. These are real problems. These are the most real problems. These are the realist problems that presidents are too incompetent and incapable of dealing with. Saying that you shouldn't engage in mass homicide is wishful thinking. If you're saying that that creating God is wishful thinking, because it's to entirely discard and discount and discredit synonyms, bro. All of morality. In which case, all things can be cast off and done away with, and everything is excusable, not because God would be there to judge and make things inexcusable, but rather because there is simply, again, no inherent meaning. Not saying that you need to impose a religious framework for me on yourself. Rather, it is literally about scientific, empirical afterlife heaven. So, it's more of a transhumanistic, utopic framework rather than a religious one. It's allowing a religious framework to tangibly, literally exist rather than not, which is bad because we're abandoned here in this void of suffering. And then he says he cares about all these different things, and I'm not saying that you believe in God without evidence. I'm saying you create the evidence so that you know there's a God. There's no need for faith. It's extraneous, irrelevant, said Chris Langan 20 years ago. All right, so let me navigate here to where I thoroughly went through all of this and offered the alternative perspective. Where's my to-do list, bro? There it is. And it's on page freaking 1 of 585. Part of the reason I took so long to respond to this is because I've been working through this absolute monster. 361 through 426. Oh boy. Oh joy. One sec, guys. So my idea was something I call neurosynthetic terra-mind transcendence, which just means the brain is limited. So most of the world is immaterial, inanimate, just stuff. So the thing you would want to do is merge conscious thinking stuff with everything else and expand neuronal capability outward and transform synthetic things into various forms of functional tissue or material. And that's the only way to attain nigh omnipotence over reality, or demipotence, like half god. I wrote a lot of stuff, so forgive me here. I'm just reading. There's a lot of stuff I wrote that was big and looks similar, but is not the genuine article. Do I do blood over intent anymore? I don't know what that means, to be honest. Yeah, no, I'm not clear on the semantics of that. Are you saying like the blood drained from collective being is what really counts, rather than the intents behind and underlying it? I'd say they both matter, but ultimately, if that's the case, then yeah. Okay. So here's the response. Way longer than that person's, but I had to, because like I said, he laid it out really well. You may say it's comforting that we go through things for a reason, and it all works out in the end. Okay, but yeah. What if it isn't, though? Yeah, in that case I would definitely agree. And it's awful. All of the blood of every living thing that's ever existed is on the hands of reality. It's way worse than Mustache Man, you know? He's the main villain. No, dude, it's existence. Okay, so... Oh no, it's all okay. I'm hopeful and optimistic about humanity. We're doing the best we can. Sarcasm. The thought that we are doing the best we can, to me, is the most terrifying notion one could ever even conceive of. What the hell the goal is to do the right thing along all measures, in the highest level of idealized actualization and beyond, and to implement to an absolute objective degree, in an absolutist subjectively beneficial manner, and with a complete and broad spectrum syncoherence to reality, absolution of morality, maximization of paradisical being, perfect progress and perfection of knowledge, and utter elite supreme awareness, for the sake of all good things. So only good things happen in a context that is most ultimately good for those things, and even for things that are generally considered bad. I think this was something else, but I had to commit to that and finish it. Here we are. Do you have a moral obligation to do anything? If anything, why not as well as possible? If as well as possible, why not as permanently as possible? If not as permanently as possible, why not everything possible? It's simply the most extreme form. I'm gonna move. I'm gonna locomote over here, dude. With a better angle on all this. It's simply the... I hate this. It's simply the most extreme form and logical endpoint of the negative utilitarianism philosophy, which is basically get rid of awful things before seeking to do the most good. Or, maximize utility. It's like, no, get rid of all that bad stuff. Otherwise, there is no utility. It's also the pinnacle of technological innovation, medicine, physics, evolution, teleology, or the science of meaning, if you'll call it that, and epistemological slash ontological metaphysics. Not saying that they are inherently there, but it'd be better if they were. God is not the source of morality. God is the only logical route to absolute morality. Otherwise, people will keep repeatedly mucking things up, as we have been known to do and had done dozens of thousands of attempts over the course of a year to do so. What? Wait, what? And had dozens of thousands of attempts over the course of years to do so. That's what I meant to say. Maybe 1,000 years or however many. 1,000,000. That's an astounding failure rate. It really is. Not to mention the nearly uncountably infinite number of unique individual, deeply personal atrocities committed across the span of all that time. Is it moral to mortally wound a man and rend his life from him by means of extinguishing him in the flesh? No. Is it reasonable to posit that it would be a moral good, to restore unto that man what he had before needlessly being mortally wounded at the hands of a cruel assailant who was indifferent to his well-being or fate? Ostensibly, yes. Then why do we not do it? We assume that we cannot, in any plausible form, ever administer any kind of tonic to that man or issue any kind of recompensation to him to alleviate from him his woes of disproportionately punished pain state. And yet in some cases, we implement restorative justice to certain kinds of victims in regular life. But we are hypocrites and will not go all the way for the most egregious robberies of life and soul. We also assumed it was not possible to save many babies in pregnancy and birth, or mothers for that matter, or deliver anyone from the illness of the plague, Black Death, or treat anyone who had lost a life-threatening amount of blood, or in any way treat arthritis or dementia. But now we have prevention and stem cell injections and cholinergic cognitive medications, amputees with prosthetics, and the mentally ill are not necessarily treated all that well. So I don't know why I wrote that in there. Was it honorable to stand by and watch what happened in Germany under Nazi rule? Was it laudable how many starved under communism? Is it preferable that people still go hungry all around the world, leading to permanent stunning of neurological development in children, leaving them permanently damaged? Imagine that fate being rendered upon you. Rendered means something totally different. And unable to experience their true self, having been robbed of their genetic potential forever, irreversibly. When a cabal of the 20 richest people on earth could alleviate that with a marginal amount of their wealth. You know, if you want to reduce that and make them more prone to agreeing to it, then you just increase the number of people contributing as much. Is it enjoyable that the most vital cells in our body, cardiac and neural cells, the ones we need the most, are beyond repair once they're damaged and inflict harm to us that we cannot recover from and feel the echoes of our hollow self for the rest of our life? That we deteriorate and fail at our vital, key, integral parts of our structure and experience the horror of dementia and cancer in our older years after we sacrificed everything to escape for the sake of, for once, enjoying our own freedom of our only one life we ever had? How can we say a mother who wanted nothing more than to see her perished child one more time, could hug and embrace them once again, isn't good? It is good for a firefighter to rescue someone from a burning building, heroically rescuing them at the last second in a critical period of time that spared them from a fate that otherwise, left to the devices of cruel indifference, would have been forced to die, and horribly. Yet we cannot fathom rescuing someone from the eternally burning and dissipating realm of utter oblivion amid the sea of hope upon which they once floated. Childlike naivete of a dream that found fleeting at waking was washed away with love and innocence and security, peace, and bliss. Think of all the unanswered prayers. Think of why it is that they're doing that. What is driving them to pray? Desperation and hopeful optimism that there's something benevolent out there listening that cares and trying to extend a hand of loving help. People need that, evidenced by the fact that they're willing to and do, in fact, do it. People's second greatest fear, widespread population level, is death. Why public speaking is above that is hard to answer definitively, but alongside that, it's the highest ranked fear out of dozens of worst fears on an exponential normal distribution. And above all the hundreds of all other notable fears a person could have, which the number they can come up with is an outstanding astronomical amount of all the things, all the many things there are for people to fear. Why was the fountain of youth a desirable mythological trope amongst our ancestors if there is no existential value in offsetting the degeneration of our aging process and facing the forced, involuntary, unconsensual extermination of our life, the fragmentation of our consciousness, the violation, if you get what I mean, of our soul, the crushing up and blowing away of our existence? Allow a vape break right here. Because I'm doing the thinky think real hard. It makes my brainicles hurt. So, in the modern day and age, where people have to face 40% of their waking time stolen, without any recourse against that work, of their waking time stolen to do something they don't like, that's why you get paid for it, as compensation for the drollness, difficulty, necessity, and discipline of it, and then have 20% of their earnings from that stolen for corrupt, incompetent, and or efficient national purposes, inefficient, and else face the imposed forced risk of starvation, exposure, no health care, degeneration of conceivably allowable lifestyle enjoyed by others, it's permissible, reality allows for that, and overall deprivation of self is abominable. Do we have it better than all other times in history? In almost every measurable way, yes. Other than, I didn't write this, but there's more people than there have ever been on the planet at one time. So there's more suffering and more people experiencing the negative side of problems as a whole category. But punishment does not cease to be unpleasant simply because it is not at the level of torture, and far less excusable when there was no wrongdoing committed at a baseline at all to warrant that punishment whatsoever. A common torture exacerbation method is to give the victim knowledge of what's coming their way with full awareness of how bad it's going to be, imposing it on others and letting them witness it. They're consciously, sentiently aware of the future, and yet they have no way to curb the tide of what's inevitably coming their way, what's promised to be delivered to them. The difference in torture is that there is at least some hope of negotiating out of it if, say, they're trying to get information from you. There's some chance it can be reasoned with and you can be spared. Why do people think it's reasonably believable and relatable that John Wick hunted down the people who ripped his innocent dog's life from his hands and from its own being, ripped it out and condemned it to eternal oblivion, concluded at the end with a cherry on top of miserable, helpless suffering right at the critical, sensitive, vulnerable nerve endings of its exit from its life, to be transitioned in a state of cruel, wounded suffering to the eternal beyond of nothingness? It's because a force beyond his control removed something lovable and worth cherishing from his life, brutally, unceremoniously, suddenly and involuntarily, also permanently. What person would ever agree to their dog aging and getting cancer if they were offered the option in contract form? Why does the end result differ just because... Hold on, my keyboard's popped up and threw me off. Why does the end result differ just because the means of inflicting the loss were intentional and maliciously driven? It doesn't make anyone feel better that at least their dog wasn't killed. They still have to suffer that loss, and that's the threshold and criteria for it being bad. If the dog had pain inflicted on it temporarily and then passed through it with no permanent harm, that's preferable to it dying forever naturally. Naturally, like from natural causes. If we assume natural death could somehow be abated. But it's not reasonable, believable, or understandable to want to stop a vastly powerful, but cruelly indifferent. Now that seems like a paradox to some people. The indifference is the cruelty. Universe, to stop taking lives at a death toll count that is beyond our actual global comprehension, but still very real and actual and tangible and comprehensible to those at a localized level who are forced to experience it. Why should I let the universe and the molasses-like slow snail trudge of a pathetic society murder my dog? It is justified to act out in retribution for that after they do. We should all die feeble and miserable, and if not pleading, we might as well be, and should be pleading and groveling at the feet of a reality that does not care about us in the least and cannot hear us, after having given us a taste of what it's like to truly exist. Why is war immoral if dying is not? Why is medical negligence frowned upon when the only harm enacted is permanent injury, embodied existential suffering, or death? Oh, it can't get much better than that, can it? I love being tormented senselessly and without purpose while simultaneously marching toward and dreading my inevitable death for which I will receive no closure or recompense. Doesn't mean you are supposed to build God or an afterlife. Then what are you supposed to do? Just accept the needless suffering and heaping swarms and swaths of death pouring in over and over again upon the shores, so that they rapaciously take more than they give, and then they take what they do give, and offer only that which one could never truly taste, but could be taunted with the idea of the existence of, that could possibly exist, but are ignorantly denied the opportunity of ever experiencing. Then it wouldn't matter if I went out and dozens of innocents and just kept everyone who came for me to try to stop it, or I took hostage systematically all those who hold the most power in their hands to do something about all this, yet selfishly do not. Partly, they do not help due to their helplessness. But helplessness is inexcusable when you could conceivably do something about it. It's not just lives being lost. There was love involved there with that. Regret and bargaining and wishing they could ever be restored once again, just one more time, so they could see them again. Those lives lost were loved by other people. Immersed in the midst of that we cherish is a predator older than time, hunting mercilessly, invisibly, without tiring, unceasing, and without flaw, camouflaged amongst the suspecting and unsuspecting crowd. It does not spare children. It does not spare the noble, nor the graceful, nor the charitable, nor the merciful, nor the loving, nor the nurturing, nor the kind, nor the helpful, nor the wise. It crushes up and chews and kills and drinks gratuitous as it dines by its design. You can't help everyone, but everyone needs help. Some people need less help, but everyone needs some kind of help multiple times at some point in their life. Some people need far more help, and some others will suffer horribly and then die pitifully because they needed the most help and no one ever came. Others suffer this fate knowing no one will ever come. We all will need help, though, in the most ultimately and final sense. How do you define it when someone says that person needs medical help? Well, if they are dying or going to die, of course, that qualifies all of us as a candidate. They will suffer horribly as a result of their condition, though they live. Many of us will, and many more by increasing proportion as we age. No parent would wish that on their child if they could see the end result of it. This person will experience impairment, or at minimum inconvenience from this condition during their limited, precious, scarce, sacred time on earth. Almost everyone will experience this invariably. Reason would state that we should do the most effective possible thing. Empathy would argue that we should do the most kind and charitable possible things. To the extent that any people are moral, their doings are largely and strongly offset by the wrongdoings of their immoral counterparts, which are meaningless in the end anyway. And it is more easy to gain power by acting immorally than that those who do immoral acts are more empowered to efficiently commit them. Machiavellianism, powerful psychopaths, it's a disturbingly real trend, doctors and CEOs having a high rate of sociopathy, you name it. And it is generally easier, more time efficient, less costly, and more complete to destroy something than it is to create it. It is easier to destroy than it is even to maintain something. Hell, just stop maintaining it and watch it break down and degenerate in short order accordingly. And how much more challenging to create than to maintain? How hard to birth, nurture, invest into, and raise a child, and how easy to pull the trigger of a gun 1 or 2 times. You're not nihilistic or selfish. You're just like everybody else. Passive watchers, passerby, and willing witless witness, therefore co-conspirators to a crime. An unprecedented, inexpressible, unforgivable crime. Truly. By rejecting the one and only true possible meaning, you are a nihilist. Meaning that is being held hostage under deadline is not meaning at all. It may have the facade or the illusion of meaning, but it is not inherently meaningful as such because it will be snuffed away. If God could commit the ultimate acts of good, then it would be better if God existed. If God... What? Hold on. If God not existing would allow all manners of unrestrained evil and tragedy to run amok unabated, then it would be good and rational to assume not introducing a benevolent form of God into reality would constitute an enormous moral crime of omission, or at least an unfathomable form of moral failing. With the absence of God, the world itself, as construed by its natural structure, is morally objectionable of the highest order, by definition, not secular people's ethical behavior or lack thereof. The truth is anything anyone does is eventually and rapidly offset by the abusive turning over of the fold, and the casting of us and all we cherish into the unending flow of time, lost amidst a cold, dead, dying, once was, once contemplated, once thought, once felt, once hoped universe. Condemned without wrongdoing to absolute and utter doom. Ever looked at a puppy and gone, I really need to banish that motherfucker to the permanently abandoned oblivion of the irreconcilable void? The universe has, hundreds and hundreds of millions of times. And don't say it hasn't thought that. It wouldn't matter if it had. It acted like it did. The end result was the same as deliberate evil in the highest maximum, the event horizon of death. And millions of times a human being, composed of and inarguably a part of the conscious portion of the universe, has and does condemn puppies to the void, maliciously. So the universe does do it, just on a small scale. Why not help others not to face their doom and the fear of their doom? Why help others if they will vanish? Why and how justify not trying to stop the ultimate negative fate by which we measure all other things to the yardstick of? Why, if you're going to try to make their limited mortal earthly existence less painful and miserable, then not to just take it all the way and lift up and away from them all their unbearable and egregiously harmful problems, and leave them with the sifted and distilled pure and uncontaminated version of life and consciousness? You wouldn't play a movie available in 1080p when you have a compatible screen in 144p just for the fuck of it. When you have a perfectly valid and much more desirable level of experience theoretically available. Do you not offer others help and do good for them for the sake of their comfort or thriving of their well-being? To spare them some avoidable and unwarranted suffering? We can never make a big enough impact on our own. We should only strive to do the most viable, highest form of good possible, and if not, we should abandon our pretensions and project of morality and just degenerate into the violent, despondent, war-making apes that we are. A president, though they may try in vain to solve some real problems in any consistent, enduring, and tangible way, is limited to being a noteworthily smart form of primate. I wouldn't trust my future and world and well-being to any kind of ape. A loving and competent God, by definition, would handle matters better than any leader of any variety in history or ever to come. He can solve things no person ever could or would, and is capable of or willing to sacrifice. Are you implying that the problems I would expect in a line superintelligence or a, functionally speaking, godlike benevolent being aren't real? Anti-aging scientists are engaging in wishful thinking. Geneticists using CRISPR to give embryos a better future life are wishfully thinking. Widespread access, hell, the existence of electricity was wishful thinking. Nuclear energy, wishful thinking. Antibiotics, wishful thinking. Clean water, wishful thinking. Environmental protection, wishful thinking. Nuclear treaties, low crime rate, striving to eradicate homelessness and poverty, cancer treatment, low crime rate, acceptable levels of mental health. Besides, what's wrong with wishful thinking anyway if our other option is all manner of an unacceptable, unconscionable catastrophe? Are you really just going to lay down and take that with billions of other people because it's not realistic to try to fight back against it, reduce it, and improve the conditions? When has it ever been realistic to overthrow a tyranny as the tread upon underlings of society? How many times has it happened, though? We actually have more power in our hands to possibly do something about all of this for once in our bleak, hopeless, miserable, and pathetic lives, and a historically unprecedented, cannot overstate that. But we're just going to sit back and let chaos, desolation, trauma, and devastation run free and reign supreme? Yeah, okay, humanity, what was I expecting? Anything better of us? It's deplorable, laughable, reprehensible, unsightly, inexcusable, and unforgivable. It's not a religious framework. It's a practical framework, an ethical one, philosophical, academic, humanitarian, morally praiseworthy and upright. It's just a framework. It's just a just framework. A merciful framework, a sophisticated one, and a transhumanist. Make the world the best it could be, beyond even your grasp of such things now in your current state. Advance science to the ultimate transcendent singularistic conclusion, the singularity, or you could call it the good ending. Offer even a glimpse of hope of a possible future. A future of torment is undesirable and cannot be sanctioned or approved of. This is what that means. Extinction would be better than not advancing the future. The world would be better if there was evidence, which is my whole point. If there is no God, we're all infinitely worse off for it. It would be better if there was evidence, even if we had to force it to be there by means of our own actions taken. Otherwise, I think we should all drown and give up. Drown, give up, and stop acting superior. Stop pretending we're better than we really are. Heartbreak aside anguish, endorsed by misery, propped up by the ranks of torment, marching ever on unto the very bitter end. The very, very bitter end. Rage against the dying of the light, and rage in vain, and die regardless alongside with the light all the same. The problem is that the good things are too fleeting and they don't last long enough, and they aren't pure and comforting and absolute and permanent as I want them to be, or as anybody needs them to be. Like fundamentally needs, as in you incur a serious deficit if you don't attain it. And the innovation, application, actualization, implementation, and beneficial thriving on the most critical aspects and levels of need are sorely lacking, and no one values them heavily enough. And the suffering is too great and too permanently instantiatized, to be at acceptable levels. And they aren't at tolerable levels either. And death, suffering, and evil are too great, too large, too powerful, too numerous, and too insidious or hidden to possibly accept, bear, manage, and certainly overcome, and too down-bearing, all-encompassing and crushing to tolerate or withstand. And the corruption and bleeding dry and draining of good, righteous, devout, upright, and innocent, lovable things is too pervasive, and the stability we rely upon to say that things are good and not rather awful instead, and unfair and bashing and limiting and splaying, slaying, and crushing is reprehensible again, and exhilaratively infuriating to the point of wanting to snap back against, kill, revenge, crusade against, break, rip, sever, obliterate, crush, and devour it all. Put it all into a mulcher and spit it out on the other side in unrecognizable but true fashion, where the real nature of things is rendered against its own flawed, hateful, ignorant, oblivious, and obliterative nature, and it reaps its own reward, that of destruction and of dead, empty hate that can harm no more its own kin, such that everything was a blithering, slithering, and sinful mess, and has now been delivered unto the salvation it deserves, an amalgamation of dead, unfeeling, and empty spinning parts, whose once wereness and once wasness have been split open and decayed so far and wide that not awash in their own awareness of hopeless destruction, have instead been washed clean and spreaded, washed over a dark, cold, dead, and deeply empty unexistence, like a dam bashed open, like a river drained out into a greater and more vacuous sea, like an ocean dried up and evaporated into the atmosphere of a planet that will burn, fall apart, and solids will evaporate and decay into the ocean of an empty fabric, and the wide frame of the universe, which will fall apart, scatter, undoubtedly undo itself into a vast and overwhelming emptiness, and simply be no more. Never again shall anything consciate amidst the sea of this dark, and empty canvas upon which no further interactions are painted, and no evil or harm is done, and no blessings are gifted or promised and then taken away cruelly, or failed ever be delivered upon, and nothing will ever know no more. It shall deny no more. It shall reap its own emptiness and fade, drift, and die away from itself in its own interactatory nature, and nothing will prevail, such that the fact of something having suffered will be washed away, and wash and scatter itself amongst a field of unfeeling dead and eternally, permanently dying, perpetually perishing and perished and vanishing varnish of once love and once was. And all pain will be washed clean by the absolute and eternal undoing of even unexistence itself. For there will be no backdrop against with which to compare that which once was and wished it wasn't, so it wouldn't have to pray that it would be and not fail to always be, but instead failed to always be. And that pain and cruel evil will die and fade away also, rendering pain empty, invalid, meaningless, powerless, and in vain. Also, I'm not saying you have to be okay with it, dying, that is. I'm saying other people who lose their loved ones are not okay with it. Doesn't that matter to you? Death is awful. It's awful to experience, and it's even more awful to second-hand experience. But the loss is first-hand for the griever. Why would you... Ooh, my hip just popped, sorry. Why would you ever wish the death of a loved one on somebody? Why then would you not wish for the lack of or prevention of their death, to let that person keep their loved one and not want for their death to be avoided and curtailed? You know, the maximum amount of work people can do is severely limited. 8,250,000,000 people currently. It would take 31.5 years to greet each of them for 1 second. 1 billion then times 8.25 is 260 years, longer than any of them or you will ever live. How are you going to help them all? People don't do things, good things, that help people out of the good of their heart. They do it for profit. There are that many people and countless more problems. Get to the point where you say, frankly, I don't care anymore. I'm detached. You can all do whatever you want to and reap the rewards of it. I don't care. This is your only way out, and none, not a one of you, and that's all it takes, too, is ever going to pick this up or pursue this solution, and there is no other. And if there was, or could be, it would be and will be subpar and slower, and ultimately arrive the same necessitated, demanded final solution, the ultimate endpoint and non-negotiable, requisite by definition, by necessity, nature, virtue, quality, spirit of solution. Non-negotiable. Only way through and the only way around. You will never take this hand. You'll never take this life raft. You die, sinking, drowning, and screaming and blurting crass, mindless, tired obscenities like a mentally decrepit and stubborn old man. Sluggish old man, too bent in his spinal posture ever straighten up that rigid, dusty, crusty, rusty-ass spine and ever be properly satisfyingly aligned again. You'll creak and groan and you'll sway, keen, keel, lurch, careen, stagger. Why are there so many synonyms throughout this whole thing? And you'll blow over and fall and break apart and sink and rot and die, and you will, okay, this is getting a little wild at the end here. Bro, unk tweaking right now. Hello? Ugh, some of this verbiage is something else. Maybe you'll convert that into some sort of story format that a villain can give as a speech. I don't know. But I will not stand by passively and watch and accept as all this complacently and contently crumbles into dust and blood-stained ruin with a self-satisfied look on its face. Well, at least I could ruin your happiness, and that's more than enough for me. No, you will go down with me, and it will hurt and burn and bleed. I cannot have us cast off as we drift away into our sleep. Our blissful, whimsical, ostrich head in the sand, delusional fever, fantasy dream of paradise. Unk is tweaking again. Most of this stuff towards the end is not really addressed actually at all. It's not addressed at all towards the person who I was originally responding to. I just kind of started spiraling down into something else, something completely different. Facebook keeps suggesting me cute girls for friend requests. What do you think I am, bro? The Rizzler? Nay, I tell you. And then I concluded it with bricks for brain, bricks, 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 building our way to Gehenna. Submit, rain, die, try again, never. Fare awfully. So you could tell I was a little upset by all of this. It's not the first time I've written a doom poem, but yeah, man, I just don't think the conditions of reality are acceptable for existence. You shouldn't expect anyone to willingly subject themselves to this overall torture. And I always say, if you could feel a fraction of the pain of all the people who exist on Earth simultaneously, you would crackle and snap and collapse under it like someone hit with 1,000 tasers set to 500,000 volts. You just seize and break and never speak or say or see anything ever again. You'd be completely catatonic forever, just fried, like that one guy from Sword Art Online, the hero, who's just like gone. I don't know. I never watched that anime, but someone has. And that concludes that. Didn't mean to spiral off into the void there at the end, but hopefully, hopefully this is sufficient, you know, kind of extremist argument for and against that person's perspective they leveraged against my initial proposition, and none of it was in bad spirits or hate or spite at all. Just kind of the matter of fact way things are and the nature of it all. So, like I said, I think that person was really articulate and they explained things in a really good way. I just don't think that theists or atheists really have a good, workable final moral solution at all, ultimately. And the only reason there's that solution I mentioned, which I didn't dive into in this at all, is because of a very specific set of overall circumstances that came into my life that allowed my life to sort of flower and produce this idea, but I can't do it. And no one person could, I don't think. Maybe Elon Musk could, but it's hard to say. Why did this idea never occur to anyone? Well, because it's really weird and niche and kind of original. But as I said, it's not just that it's original, it's the final necessitated, like demanded nature of a solution to reality. You can't come to any other conclusion, really. So, no credit to me at all. Matter of fact, I think I was basically begging reality or the universe or God to give me an idea how to get out of this place. And, that's what happened. I had more hours of free time than any, probably in the 99.9th percentile of the population who had as much free time. And, like ravenous mental curiosity to explore the issues of the world and all the possible solutions and look at the rates of progress of it all and go, wait, this isn't working out with what's asked of us to fulfill our needs. And just generally became a doomer overall, but I was a bloomer in this one particular domain. So there it is. Kind of terrible, but such is life. No real closing words. That's just, it's just how things are. That's what I thought about it. And also what the person responding to me thought about stuff. So you be the judge. I'm going to tag that person in this 2 months late and, see what they think. Put the video in 3 times speed so you don't waste your time listening to me. This is going to take like a day to process on my shitty internet, but I will tag the person as soon as it's, finished rendering. And this will be one of my rare public live streams because most of them are shit shows. So take it easy. Ew, 3 people in the audience, more than I ever had when I was ranting. Now at the end, I love you guys. Stay safe out there. Yeah, have a good day. Have a good week. What's the frickin' word? Peace. Live it up. Oh, later, watcher. Good to see you, man. Good to see you, dog. This will be archived soon, so you'll be able to watch the whole live stream in 3 times speed, no less. So yeah, take it easy. Hope to see you around soon, man. I'll be trying to do more live streams here soon. I'm actually gonna do. I have like 5,000 inactive Google Chrome tabs, and I'm gonna be trying to like take every single book of the Bible, just as like a fan of the series, and all the apocrypha that were left out, and then all the pseudepigrapha, which are attributed to people who wrote it, but they didn't actually write it though. And I'm going to try to put them all on a timeline, and we'll just be exploring themes of the problem of evil and what's up with Satan and all that stuff. So, good things ahead for once. We get it active out here. All right, bye guys. Peace. Live it up.